Welcome everybody to Contractuo Podcast, episode number 13.
Let's go.
We do another one.
Yeah.
It's very important to keep the pace, Eduardo.
Flooding the internet with content.
We literally are flooding it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really insane how much we have output already, and it's really easy actually. I do have to say it's I don't maybe
I will kindly disagree.
But maybe it's just because my quality sense is pretty low, so I just chop up everything I can get a hold onto, and then I just flood the internet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
it is really easy to throw things into the internet.
Yeah.
It's not easy to produce quality content.
No, definitely. So, okay, I definitely agree with that. And I do have to say you need to learn it, right?
Oh yeah, the amount of things that we've changed and upgraded and then fixed and then changed again.
Yeah,
it's now insane. I think we have something more solid. Mm-hmm. Now we're recording everything perfectly, and we have now a separate camera, separate audio interface. Everything is individual.
Not only that, we also have a schedule, right? That's what I mean. It's getting easier, probably.
Also the whole thing surround, because the sitting down and recording was always technically easy, the easy part, right? Because we were always here on the same day, so it's not a problem. But the problem was everything surrounding mm-hmm. the content producing. That was the biggest issue. But now I think we're coming to a nice, easy. Just sit down, press the button, and everything is already done.
Yeah, definitely. And also way more organized.
Oh, for sure.
And
that allows us to be more creative, because then we can focus on other things.
Proposing topics.
Proposing topics, indeed.
That, it's some people will forget.
I have no idea what he's talking about.
He just doesn't listen. That's a problem.
I do listen. His message is just not coming across the way he intends it to. I'm
not in the mental state, Eduardo, to, take off with this.
All right. So, do you want to introduce the topic of the day, Jack?
Well, I actually want to, hook out to the episode from, technically
the last two episodes,
Friday.
Technically.
Yeah. So, which is mainly, forcing people to come to the office. And why is that, such a prevalent topic? I mean, a lot of companies, after the incident that happened exactly, force employees back to come to the office. At least,
Let's say the company was forced to have everyone working from home because
mm-hmm.
it was impossible to do work otherwise.
Yep. Or it was permitted, not permitted, but prohibited.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And now let's say we see the reverse wave
mm-hmm.
of all companies forcing employees back into the office. And let's say, what are the effects of this? Why is this happening, or should this happen? And
also the opinion of us. So
yeah.
I really want to hear you out, because, you probably also have a lot of friends that are affected by that. I also had the same. So I heard, a lot of stories of some companies being very honest about it, and some companies being, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that first of all, the whole initial wave of home office was a huge shock to everyone, because
you think so?
Yeah, because it was something like to everyone. I mean, to every company, right? Mm-hmm. To the people, it was more like a benefit, right?
Yeah,
because there was a lot of people, and I know a lot of people who benefited immensely from home office, because they were going to their offices and basically doing the same thing. It was just taking them more time to commute, and also, let's say, being in an environment which they didn't like as much.
Mm-hmm.
So for a lot of people, it was a positive thing. But for the companies, right? So every company had, especially big companies, they have these huge office buildings which they rent.
Yeah.
And then they pay an immense amount of money for people to all be in the same office building, even though that's technically not necessary. So it's for a lot of companies, it was kind of a shock, oh, wait, we don't need to have this huge office building that everyone has to come to every day, and we can still produce the same output? What is this? What kind of sorcery is this? So a lot of people that I know that work in big companies, they heard that from their superiors, or for people that are higher up that have this kind of power, that the company was going to be disbanding a lot of a lot of the buildings or a lot of the office spaces that they had in favor of a more flexible approach, where instead of having like an entire building
Yep.
for just one company where everyone would go to the building like every day, they would now have a much more reduced space, and they would have like a cyclical approach where a few people would go in on Mondays, another group on Tuesdays and Thursday. Like you have like a cycle, or like just a varying approach. And like, first of all, the company saves money because they don't need to rent that huge space, which is very expensive.
Yep.
And then for the people, they get the benefit of a flexible approach, so they can work from home and from the office, so they can get the benefits from both without exaggerating on too much on either. So I don't know. I feel like the whole movement away from physical offices was really nice as a whole, because it opened up the eyes of a lot of people. But at the same time, it opened up this problem that you said, which is like nowadays, since the pandemic is over, then every company is like rethinking this approach.
Yep.
And let's say a few of them are coming to the conclusion that they should force everyone back into the office.
Yes, but I also am very fascinated about how some of them do that. You know, it's not, you know, some companies are really upfront and honest and be like, you know, like we need to, you know, have at least 2 or 3 days of office time, just so that, you know, everybody's on board, that we can do focused work and that we can work together in a team, right?
Yep.
Fair and square. If that is something that, you know, you subscribe to, then, you know, it is the case. But I also find it very interesting where some of the companies are, you know, how should I say it? They sell it as a net benefit, but like with like a very bitter sweet taste to it, you know? And that's where I'm always, you know, kind of struck, because like first you start to you know, tell people like, look, you need to be at home. Then it's like, no, you need to come back. And then it's like, no, like you are not even allowed to, you know, do like remote anymore because you need to come to the office, right?
Yeah. Back to normal.
Back to normal. Yep. And like you said, it first opened up a lot of companies' eyes, right? But I don't know where it comes from that now a lot of them are pivoting back. And, you know, it could be in a case that, you know, a lot of companies recognize that, you know, like that it's not all to be, you know, remote and sitting at home and doing your work and that's it, right? Like it takes more than that. Like we also discussed in the last episode that, you know, being in the office has also a lot of, you know, benefits. And needs that you cannot otherwise do through sitting at home by yourself and, you know, being in a Zoom call or whatever. But I do feel like a lot of, you know, people feel it to be a drastic change. And by drastic, I mean, you know, if you forced people to come 3 days to the office, it's different than telling them like, look, it's, you know, you can still be remote, but we would prefer you to come to the office because of certain things, right? And that's where I have my gripes with, because in the end, we are, in my opinion, in a position where, you know, you have to trust your employees, because otherwise, if you don't trust them, like why, you know?
Why even have them?
Yeah. I mean, it's very hard, you know, to say, but.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, I understand kind of both points.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, like from the employee perspective, it's way nicer to have the flexibility.
Yep.
Right. But I do understand that there are certain employers who see a need like for more control, right? Or for more overseeing like the work. Because I do think it's easier to control what's going on in the office space.
Are you sure though?
I think so. Like,
but how?
I mean, it's the whole point of like, you seeing them doing it versus you hearing what they're doing.
Okay, question. You know? How do you know that I am programming?
No, like obviously, personally, I will see the output that you produce.
Exactly, the output.
Yep. Yeah, you can always measure the output in our case because we're producing stuff.
Yep.
But what about the people that don't produce, or like their work doesn't involve like a very easy to measure output? Because our work is just really easy to check. So you have a feature you want to develop.
Yep.
either in the end of the sprint that feature is there or it isn't. So it's really easy to check.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
but what about other kind of works where you don't necessarily produce the same kind of output, but where it's super easy to measure?
I agree, but on the other hand, it's, you know, in any other kind of work, you also need to produce output in some sort of way.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a way that people, let's say, can oversee your work and check, like, oh, this is what he's supposed to be doing, or this is not correct, or he's not producing. Like, yes, that can happen, but it's not always as easy, because there are certain jobs where it's just like, I don't know, you have a lot of meetings, you have a lot of other things or external things that you need to produce, which are not super easy to keep track of. And I think for those specific cases, for the company, for the employer, it's easier to keep a track of what's going on, or like keep a grip on it when you're physically there. For us, like you said, it doesn't really make a difference because our output is really easy to measure. But yeah, I understand both points, even though I am in favor of the flexibility always, because giving the power to the hands of the people is always, you know.
But, you know, like, then I will play, now that you go back to the plus side, I will be devil's advocate again, because, you know, I do understand why people are doing that, right? I also, you know,
doing what? Moving
people to the office and forcing it, because, you know, from my experience also, I know that there's plenty of people which, you know, I'm sorry to say, but they take advantage of it, right? And by advantage, meaning that, you know, there is just people that can't work, let's say, on their own, or like they need external motivators, let's call it like this, because otherwise they will just either feel lost or they will just not do it, right? And that is also something that you don't want, because then the people that actually do the job, you know, end up doing other people's job. And that's how you create, let's say, a culture where people will be very upset in general, right? Because
it's like school group work where you have the one guy who is doing everyone's work and everyone's getting the credits.
Except that school is over, you know.
Yeah,
and
exactly,
now
of course.
Now it's just, you know, it's reality. And in the end, you want to make sure, right, that everybody is like pulling in the same direction. So that's where I understand it, right? But in my opinion, to me, that comes back to the whole, you know, topic of trust and topic of, let's say, putting in the time to create a team or create a culture around it that enables you to, you know, like, tell somebody to go to, I don't know, Spain or whatever, and then, you know, let him or her work wherever and whenever they want, right? The only thing that in the end matters is that everybody agrees to a certain output and that is done, right? And that you can also maybe help out, right?
It's like there are conditions that need to be met in order for everyone to be satisfied. And I do agree. But going into that trust topic, don't you think that this is sort of tied to your personal values? Because you personally value trust highly, but there might be other people who don't have the same perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And but that, you know, ties to the same point back to what I meant with, you know, hiring employees that you feel comfortable working with.
Yeah.
Because if a person doesn't share that, right, if they share other values, which is also fine, it's hard to then, you know, get along each other.
But would you say then that sharing common values, like the card game that we mentioned previously, I don't know if there's a name for this card game.
Moving motivators.
If you want to look it up, I think it's a German card game. Is there a name?
I don't think it's a card game. I think it's just
anyway, just look it up.
It's an exercise, like a team exercise, basically.
So in there are certain values that people use to, let's say, rank them in a certain order in what like they prioritize.
Yeah.
So would you say that having similar moving motivators as your teammates or as your colleagues is an essential part of the team?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you have someone in your team that has like doesn't have the same values or has like not necessarily opposite, because like all those values have a certain value, all of them have a like positives and negatives, but having people that with different values as you, would you say that it's like difficult to work with them, or?
Yeah, I personally do experience that. Obviously, it's not like a general rule, right? It's not like, okay, he's completely different, I can work with him because, you know, he valued the car like on a different scale. But it makes it definitely easier. And you can also like feel the difference if you encounter people like that, right? Because in the end, you will just, like you get in the state of flow much easier with people, I think. And, you know, if to tie it back to the topic, right? If you get along with people and if you can also agree on certain topics with people and maybe even agree on certain topics without even, you know, talking about them, it, you know, causes less friction in the, you know, things that could occupy more space for, you know, that stress or like that friction time to you to handle.
Yeah,
right?
I think friction is a nice word. So yeah, I agree. If you have, let's say, closer values to your teammates, then there's a lot less friction. But, and then here's where I want to introduce the counter argument, which is the fact that the lack of diversity might lead you all to sort of always take the same approach, where if you have people from different, with different values or different weights to those values, then you have, let's say, a different approach which can benefit everyone.
I agree. Absolutely. Don't want to neglect it. The only thing that I would like to stress on this is that, you know, like if you bring diversity in all the time, you will get nowhere, right? Because you need to have a time period where you focus on something and narrow it down to, you know, to achieve a goal. Exactly.
To get it done.
Yeah, to get it done. And then, you know, like introducing these things like bit by bit is definitely healthy and necessary. But I think it comes down to timing, and it also comes down then like to the whole discussion of, you know, where do we want to go and how do you want to do it, right?
Yeah.
And that's also the same with the whole, you know, with the whole debate of forcing people to come to the office, right? It's, I you know, to me, I think it's such a prevalent, or like it was probably a prevalent topic because, you know, it happened now already. But I think why it was so prevalent is because these things were not in place. You know, like I think most of these companies were like, I'm sorry to say, but they were like preaching suddenly like, yeah, remote is good. Let's do all remote. Remote is super cool. Stay at home. And then suddenly it's like, boom, come to the office.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they were necessarily preaching it or if they were sort of forced to preach it because of the condition.
But, you know, that's what I mean. Like it causes the friction, right? Because it wasn't laid out properly.
Yeah.
If you would have laid out it, you know, like in the sense that you would say, okay, look, guys, like you do home office now.
I think it's your favorite topic, expectation management.
Yep, expectation management, and that's where I want to pull it towards, right? And if you would lay it out, people would not, you know, stress out about it. So
if you tell them in advance, like, oh, guys, this is a temporary thing. We're doing home office now because, well, there's a world pandemic, and as soon as it's handled, we will go back to the normal. I'm doing air quotes, by the way. And then that way you set this expectation that it's a temporary situation. But if you just tell them like, oh, nice, we're now doing home office. And then suddenly it's like, is the pandemic over? Like, is it still going on? Are we now back to the office? Are we not? And then it introduces this uncertainty, which I think creates a lot of issues.
Yeah. And it also, you know, in my opinion, just puts people off. And that's like where it's, not nice, in my opinion. Because in the end, it's as an employer, it's very important to know and communicate these things clearly. And that's what I also, you know, meant with the whole, stressors that you introduce in the company, because, you know, there will be people very happy about it, right? There will be people very angry at you. And, you know, like people might, doubt whether or not you can put a vision or like, you know, lead.
I think it serves as an example, right? So if the employer is like communicating well and is setting the expectations correctly, I think it also, let's say, inspires the employees to follow suit and do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So say it comes top down, like not necessarily, but
No,
it's good to set the example, right? So if you have someone that you're literally looking up to, and they're doing a certain thing which is nice and makes you feel good about yourself, then you can more easily reproduce it, and I think it builds a better environment for everyone. So
yeah, definitely. But do you have, like, let's say that I mean, because like at Contractuo we don't have it, to be honest. I mean, we were also forced, let's say, to have home office, right?
Yeah.
But for us, it's really not as important whether or not you come to the office, because I mean, Tassos also works from Greece.
Yeah.
So we never had that issue, and like you said, our work also literally does not need that. Like I can literally know whether or not you guys have done something, or you can know whether or not I have done something by just looking into my feature log, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, where I want to go towards, like, do you have any friends that have experienced this harsh transitions also? Or?
I mean, I think the best example I have is with my mom.
Okay.
She might be watching this also, by the way. Shout out.
Yeah.
Love you. So she works at a pretty big company in Brazil, and they were very strict in the home office thing back in the days, like before the transition, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't used to do home office. She was always going to the office basically every day, and we live in a city that's right next to Rio in Brazil. So she would commute every day, like, I don't know, an hour and a half sometimes, if there's traffic, like maybe even more, to get to her office. And she would work there and then come back home. So you can imagine like 2-3 hours of your day gone just commuting, right? But then there was a problem. This is all before the pandemic, right? There was a problem, or like the company switched office spaces. So she was now going to a different office, which was way further than the current one. And the commute time went from like 1.5 hours to like 2-3 hours bare bones without traffic. So with traffic, it's even worse. So at that point, she, I think, put in the argument that it would be nicer for everyone to have, like for her specifically, to have like a few home office days, because like just the commute time is just taking away so much from her week, that she would be more productive by having to go to the office fewer days, like to have fewer office days. I mean, so she actually started home officing before home office was a thing, right? And as soon as the pandemic hit, for her, the transition was easier because she already had the argument. So of course, the whole company at one point went into home office mode. And then once they started transitioning back, I think nowadays she actually got the reverse effect. So now she's actually still going to the office every day. And it was worse because now they're requesting more office days.
All right.
Even though she already had, that's the thing. I think it ties into your point of like companies now forcing the employees to go to the office for whatever reason. So she now has to go more often to the office. She still has some home office days, but yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know why the companies are, let's say, really keen into bringing people back into the office without a valid reason, right? Because if there is a valid reason, sure. But most of the times it's just like a executive decision, like.
Yeah, but it's honestly, isn't it just like, look, we don't trust you? It's just,
kind of, yeah, it is.
But yeah.
Yeah, and if there's one thing I can argue for my mom is that she works insanely at home. Like she works maybe even more than she does at the office. It's crazy. Like I do not understand how she can do that, but she's like insanely focused, and I envy that because I don't have that same focus. But it's crazy. So that's to me the biggest example I have. Of course, I have other friends that also experienced it, but for them it was more like the traditional approach that we just mentioned. So it's like they're working physically, pandemic hits, they go remote. Now they're basically transitioning back into the physical office mostly, but still maintaining some, because like I think everyone just noticed that there are benefits to home office. Like you don't need to have everyone in the office every day. The office is nice, but you don't need them every day there. So once they realize those benefits.
Yeah, the problem, I think it's just that, like it in the end, I wonder whether or not, they really have an overview somehow of, it not being worth it. Or like usually, comparison.
Probably these big companies, they have ways to measure
that's
productive output.
That's why I'm really, like I'm like I don't doubt their decision, but I would really like to know the data.
To know the numbers, yeah. To see the numbers, yeah.
You know, I don't know, because there's also companies, you know, having keyloggers and all this kind of things.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. Like maybe they just, you know, log the amount of keystrokes in a day or something like this, compared it to, you know, like the 2019 data or whatever.
Yeah.
And then took a decision, right? So
I think there is an argument behind it. We just don't know it.
Yeah. And I really would like to know. So if you guys know, by the way, like let me know if you have the data, please.
Share it with us. Or maybe share your input. Like if you have some arguments.
Ooh, like a leak, you mean?
I didn't say anything.
Is that not allowed?
Technically not. I don't think so.
I will the dolphins will attack us again. So.
Nah. But yeah. Anyway.
But yeah. All right. I think that's a good
wrap for the episode.
Definitely. Eduardo has to go again. He just, you know, keeps on disrupting the podcast.
I will not add anything to this discussion.
Definitely.
But anyway.
But we have to bounce.
So
thank you very much for joining us again. Exactly. What do they have to do still?
Well, leave a like. Share this video with your colleagues. Subscribe. Leave your comments with your thoughts on our opinions. Maybe your counter arguments to what we said here. Maybe you agree with us. Who knows?
Maybe you have spicy data.
Yeah. But yeah, also check out our shorts channel.
Please do so.
Go to our Discord. Join us there.
Yep.
Get in touch. And yeah, I think that's the whole
plenty.
checklist, right?
Yeah.
So
anyway, guys.
Thank you.
And see you next time.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.